This module will cover the required components and detailed overview of the Individualized Education Program, IEP, for school-age children. Once a district has determined that a student requires a specialized education program based upon the student's response to an evidence-based intervention and subsequent evaluation assessment process, they have 30 calendar days to develop and hold an initial IEP meeting. The IEP team will be required to meet to review and update the IEP at least once a year unless a child turns 22 years of age, tests out of services, receives a diploma, or the parent revokes consent for services. On the cover page of the IEP, it is important to ensure that the district's information is complete and accurate. Much of the information on the cover page will become part of the Education Management Information System, or EMIS, records that the district must submit for annual reporting. Please be attentive to the date of the meeting and the type of the meeting being held. One of the most misunderstood areas on the cover page is in the box labeled IEP Timelines, where it indicates the date of the next IEP review. An example of using the next IEP review section might include the date the team will reconvene to determine the need for extended school year services, in which case this date would match the date to review in Section 4. Another example would be the date the team will meet to determine whether progress monitoring data indicates a need to amend the IEP. Otherwise, use the annual IEP review date. If, during the duration of the IEP, the district needs to amend any section of the IEP, this information would be captured at the bottom of the page as well. This section is for participants to initial if any changes are made to the IEP by way of amendment. The amendment needs to be also stated in the IEP sections, not only on the cover page. The amendment process does not necessarily need to be a face-to-face meeting, but the parent does need to be involved. The District of Residence, the DOR, is the school or district where the student's parents or guardians reside, which is responsible for ensuring that an IEP is developed, implemented, and is ultimately responsible for a free, appropriate public education of the student. Districts of residence that have students who are educated outside their district have the responsibility for initiating and conducting meetings for the purpose of developing, reviewing, and revisiting the IEP. Districts of residence must maintain communication with the district of service in order to ensure compliance and accurate implementation of the IEP. Community schools are the district of residence. In the case when a community school places a child in a separate facility for their academic and/or functional services, the community school remains the DOR and continues to be responsible for the education of that child. Section 1 of the IEP asks for future planning. Parents, teachers, and students provide input on the student's long-term goals, preferences, and interests. This input is recorded through a statement or short paragraph in the future planning section. Section 2 addresses special instructional factors. While these checkboxes might seem overly simplistic, it is important to remember that if the IEP team indicates any area as yes, it must be addressed in the IEP. Section 3 contains the student's profile. The IEP team provides background information on the student. Information might include statewide assessment data, data collected through a Reading Improvement and Monitoring Plan, a RIMP, if applicable, and other information about the student that the team thinks is necessary and important for all parties involved in the IEP to know. The IEP team considers strengths of the students, area of concern, and instructional strategies that have been successful. Do not cut and paste all of the assessment data found in the ETR. Only include relevant academic or behavioral information that may have an impact on the student's academic and/or functional performance. Keep in mind that the language must be understandable to the parent and all team members involved. Section 4. Extended school year services must be considered for each goal. Extended school year services may happen at any time the school is not in session. Extended school year services are provided beyond the normal school year of the district, which includes both the days of the school year and the hours of the school day. Extended school year services are not the same as summer school, compensatory services, or enrichment programs. The IEP team should consider extended school year services to prevent significant regression of skills or knowledge retained by the child that may seriously impede the child's progress towards their educational goals, and whether extended school year services are necessary to avoid something more than adequate, recoupable regression of skills or knowledge. The team needs to determine whether the time the student will need to relearn the skills lost is excessive, particularly compared to this time it takes non-disabled students to regain skills lost during the school break. The IEP team may want to collect further data and reconvene later in the school year to determine if extended school year services are needed. The team would then enter the date on the IEP when it plans to reconvene to make the determination based on data collected. The statement of present levels of performance should be written in language understandable to all, including the parent, and contain sufficient information to establish a baseline from which each annual goal is developed. This information is not to be copied and pasted from the child's profile. It must indicate the child's current academic and functional levels compared to expected grade level standards in order to provide a framework of reference. Most current means child's performance at the time of the writing of the IEP. Data should not be more than a year old. If the student is currently receiving special education services, information about the child's progress towards his or her goals must be included in the present levels of performance. There must be a direct relationship between the annual goal and the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Annual goals are required in areas that are directly affected by the student's disability. There are 3 elements of a measurable goal. All 3 elements must be a part of each goal on the IEP in order to be considered compliant. The first element of a measurable goal is clearly defined behavior. The second element of a measurable goal is the condition under which the behavior will occur. And the final element is the criteria that will be used to evaluate the performance of the behavior. Clearly defined behavior is defined as the specific action the student will be expected to perform. The behavior should be based on one specific skill. Do not blend skills such as decoding and fluency in one goal. Each goal should only have one verb. The description of the skill should be clear, concise, and specific. Avoid using broad terms like targeted math skills or targeted reading tasks. The next element of a measurable goal is the condition under which the behavior will occur. The condition can be defined as the situation, setting, or given materials in which the behavior is to be performed. Grade level material needs to be specifically defined to their ability level or their grade level. The last element of a measurable goal is the criteria that will be used to evaluate the performance of the behavior. The definition of performance criteria is the level the student must demonstrate for mastery, for example, 80%, and the number of times that the skill or behavior must be demonstrated to be considered proficient, for example, 4 out of 5 trials. The annual goal and the baseline in the present levels must be stated in the same unit of measurement. For instance, if the goal reads, when given subtraction problems with regrouping, Donna will solve the problems at 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials. Then the present levels would state what Donna's current baseline is in solving subtraction problems with regrouping. Example, 60% accuracy in 2 out of 5 trials. Avoid using vague terms such as increase or decrease with a baseline or targeted of acceptable performance. Performance criteria should include both a level of degree and a level of mastery. Below the measurable annual goal, there's a checkbox, lettered A through K. The district must determine and identify here the best way to monitor the progress towards the annual goal for the student. Remember that if the observation box is checked, there must also be written records in order to support this method of data collection. Progress monitoring is used to determine if the student is making progress on IEP goals. Frequent data collection on how the student is performing in relation to IEP goals and how the specially designed instruction is being implemented helps determine if the specially designed instruction, accommodations, and interventions in the IEP are working. The data compiled from progress monitoring can be a basis to reevaluate the IEP and reconvene the IEP team to make any needed adjustments in the services and supports to better meet the needs of the student. Progress should be monitored using the same unit of measurements in the goal to best determine progress towards the goal. You will also indicate the frequency of reporting progress to the child's parent. Remember, while progress reporting to the parent occurs at each grading period, progress monitoring can occur throughout the grading period to guide instructional decisions. Progress reports must be provided to parents of a child with a disability at least as often as report cards are issued to all children. If the district provides interim reports to all children, progress reports must be provided to all parents of a child with a disability. Please ensure that if you are using a district-related form for reporting progress, that the following components are included. First, summarize the measurable data utilized to assess the student's progress towards attaining the goal. Report the student's current performance on the goal compared to the goal mastery criteria from the IEP. Data source refers to the methods being used for measuring the child's progress towards their annual goal. Remember to refer to Section 6 of the IEP, the method boxes A through K, located under the measurable annual goal. Data points refer to the number of times and the percentage of accuracy the child is presently performing towards mastering their annual goal. Specially designed instruction, or SDI, means adapting as appropriate to the needs of a child the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the child that results from the child's disability, and to ensure that the child has access to the general education curriculum or standards extended, so that the child can meet the educational standards that apply to all children. Specially designed instruction is how you are teaching the child and how the delivery of instruction is different from what every child receives. There must be a clear connection to the specific goal referenced and the location of service. The amount of time must reflect the need of the individual student and is not based on a schedule or availability of staff. Each specially designed instruction should have only one provider and location listed so that it is clear who is doing what, where, and for how long. Specially designed instruction can also be a related service. Specially designed instruction is instructional methods and strategies specifically designed for each individual student and goal. Specially designed instruction is not simply a list of accommodations. SDIs should be specifically designed to assist the student in progressing towards achievement in their goals. When developing the specially designed instruction, teachers should consider the implications for instruction in Part 2 of the ETR, should consult with the school psychologist, and use other evidence on how the student best learns. Specially designed instruction can be provided by any intervention specialist and related service provider, not by a general education teacher or paraprofessional. Paraprofessionals and general education teachers can reinforce skills that have been taught, implement accommodations, and monitor progress. The role of the paraprofessional and the general education teacher should be documented in supports for school personnel, not in the SDI location section. Please remember to indicate the type of instruction the student's SDI will be provided, either whole group, small group, or one-on-one. Best practice for small group is to place a size limit on the number of students allotted for SDI instruction. Assistive technology is defined as any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially off the shelf, modified or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional abilities of a student with a disability. When describing the specific assistive technology, proprietary names should not be used. It is important to note that a surgically implanted device is not considered by federal law to be assistive technology. Assistive technology service means any service that directly assists a child with a disability in the selection, acquisition, or use of an assistive technology device. Please note, for assistive technology service in Section 7, the IEP form, it is necessary to identify the time and frequency. Accommodations are changes in procedures or materials that A. ensure a student has equitable access to instructional and assessment content, and B. support valid assessment results for those students who require them. Accommodations do not reduce or change learning or performance expectations. Instructional and assessment accommodations are determined by the IEP team as per the Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA. Accommodations should be determined annually based on individual student needs. Accommodations must be provided to students in all required school settings by general educators, special educators, support staff, and related service providers. Some examples of typical accommodations include extended time, scribe, paper version of test instead of online, and mathematical tools. Generally, the same accommodations provided during instruction should be provided during assessments. However, sometimes an accommodation provided during instruction may not be appropriate for an assessment. In these cases, this is because the accommodations available on the assessment is different from what or how it is used in the classroom. For example, an electronic highlighter is embedded in the online assessment, but a highlighting marker is used during instruction in the classroom. The Ohio Department of Education and Workforce offers practice tests that are housed in the state assessment portal where test administrators and students can become familiar with the online tools and support. There are a variety of accommodations that are used for both instruction and assessment. The department provides an accessibility manual that lists the administrative considerations and supports universal tools, embedded and non-embedded designed support, and the allowable accommodations that can be used during Ohio State tests. For assessment development by vendors other than the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, refer to the Vendor's Accessibility Manual. The Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA, requires that students with disabilities, including students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, are to be provided access to and make progress in grade level general education curriculum, not an alternative curriculum. The Ohio Learning Standards, OLS, are the achievement targets used for the general education curriculum. The Ohio Learning Standards Extended, OLSE, sometimes referred to as the Extended Standards, are specific statements of knowledge and skills linked to the expectations within the Ohio Learning Standards. Modifications change what a student is taught or expected to learn. Modifications to grade level learning change the expectations to learn the full breadth and or depth of grade level curriculum. Because modifications change expectations, they should be used with caution during instruction. Use caution, especially for students not taking the alternate assessment, as they will be expected to take Ohio State tests. Modifications used during instruction may result in students missing out on essential knowledge or skills. IEP teams determine whether a student needs modifications by using data and identifies what those specific modifications are and who will be making them, documenting this in Section 7 of the IEP. IEP teams should utilize accommodations and other layers of support prior to moving to modifications. The phrases modified curriculum or alternate curriculum should not be utilized within a student's IEP, as it suggests something other than the general education curriculum is the target for instruction rather than IDEA requirements. It is not suggested to have language indicating a student is on extended standards within the IEP. No student is on standards. Standards are used for the purpose of achievement targets for each grade level. The Extended Standards offers entry points to access grade level learning. The Extended Standards do not replace the Ohio Learning Standards. They are aligned to them. Students' goals should be written to the specific and targeted needs of the student within a specific subject area, topic, skill set, or range of targeted skills. Support for school personnel is not when an adult, for example, paraprofessional or occupational therapist, is providing services to a student directly. But instead, this section documents the needed support from adult to adult. For example, a paraprofessional supports a teacher in the classroom, generally at the teacher's discretion, or when an occupational therapist is providing training and guidance to teachers or occupational therapist assistant. If a child has a one-on-one direct aid services, that needs to be documented as a related service with the provider listed as an intervention specialist. In Section 10, the General Factors section of the IEP, the third grade reading component is for all students, grades K through 3. When no is selected, it prompts the writer to address the consideration in the student's profile section and or in the present levels of performance section. The least restricted environment section requires a justification statement if the child receives services, including related services, anywhere other than in the general education setting with non-disabled peers. When students are removed from the general education classrooms, districts must explain why the instruction cannot be delivered in the general education setting with non-disabled peers, along with access to accommodations and modifications. Please note that the presence of a disability alone is not a reason for removal. For example, due to the student's disability is not a justification for removal. Give specific examples of why a separate setting away from non-disabled peers is the best learning environment to assist the student in making progress in the IEP goals. Please remember, if the intention of the IEP team is that the student will receive testing away from non-disabled peers, a justification of that should be noted in both accommodations in Section 7 as well as in Section 11. Section 12 addresses students who are provided accommodations on state and district level tests and those who are taking Ohio's alternate assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, AASCD. For those taking the AASCD, the IEP team must justify the choice of the AASCD and address reasons why the test is appropriate for the student. The IEP form has a link to the Ohio's Alternate Assessment Participation Decision-Making Tool. For every student who is being considered for the AASCD, the decision-making tool must be completed in its entirety, answering all parts of the tool. The tool is divided into 4 parts, A through D. IEP teams must work through the document, starting with Part A. At the end of each part, the team should review if the student meets the eligibility criteria. If, after reviewing the information, a student does not meet the eligibility criteria in all parts, the student may not participate in Ohio's AASCD. The IEP team should ensure the decision for a student to participate in the Ohio's AASCD is not solely based on any one of the considerations listed in Part D of the decision-making tool. All members of the IEP team must sign the decision-making tool, including the district representative, parent or guardian, general education teacher, and intervention specialist. When a student with a disability also is an English learner, an educator who is familiar with the student's English language development goals should be a part of the IEP team and sign the decision-making tool too. Please attach the completed decision-making tool to the student's IEP. The decision-making tool must accompany every IEP. In a year, a student could participate in the state's general assessment, and prior to a student participating in the Ohio's alternate assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disability, the IEP team must complete Ohio's alternate assessment participation decision-making tool. Once high school students have met testing requirements for graduation, IEP teams no longer need to complete the decision-making tool. In the case where students will be participating in district and statewide assessments with accommodations, each accommodation should be specific and correspond with each test subject area. IEP teams need to note each specific test that the student will be taking and any test-specific allowable accommodations. District tests are vendor-developed tests that the district administers to all students in a specific content area or grade level. Examples of district or vendor-developed tests include the Terra Nova, the NWEA, MAP, and STAR. OAC 3301-07-01 defines a state test as any test that is developed by the Department of Education and Workforce for the use in all participating schools in the state. This slide lists those specific state tests. Tests commonly known in Ohio as alternate assessments may be used to meet some state requirements. These alternate assessments should be included under district testing in Section 12 of the IEP. There are no separate reading or writing lines in Section 12 of the IEP, so be sure to list the assessment titles in each appropriate line. Section 13 documents tests exemptions. One area of exemption is the third grade reading guarantee. If a child has a significant cognitive disability, the child is not required to take the third grade reading diagnostics assessment and is, therefore, removed from all provisions of the third grade reading guarantee. including retention. The third grade reading guarantee does not apply unless a student is approaching the testing window within the IEP term. However, RIMS, Reading Improvement and Monitoring Plans, based on the kindergarten readiness assessment scores and/or progress in the reading curriculum should be present in the profile when needed for a child in grades K through 3. If the child does not have a significant cognitive disability, all data needs to be considered, and the team needs to decide whether the child will be exempt from the retention provision of the third grade reading guarantee. See the third grade reading guarantee guidance manual on DEW's website for more information. For graduation tests in Section 13, the team is required to provide a written justification of the IEP team's decision to excuse a student from the testing requirements. Choose the category of the first column, then type in the course title in the second column, and add the justification for exemption in the third column. In addition to graduation tests, Section 13 allows the district to consider other assessments exemptions. This section is where you would document domain exemptions for assessments such as the Ohio English Learning Proficiency Assessment and the Ohio English Language Proficiency Screener. Section 14 documents meeting participation. The form has a drop-down menu which allows you to select your position title. The parent must be afforded the opportunity to participate. The school district is responsible to ensure that meetings are scheduled early enough so that all parties have the opportunity to attend at a mutually agreed upon place and time. In an attempt to ensure parental participation, the parent and school district may agree to some alternate means of participation, such as video conferencing or phone conferences. If alternate means are chosen, they must be documented as such. This is documented at the top left-hand side of the meeting participation page of the IEP. In some cases, required members of the IEP team may be excused from attending the IEP meeting in whole or in part, provided that the school district and parent agree in writing prior to the meeting. The required members include parent, general education teacher, special education teacher, and district representative. If the child does not have a general education teacher during the school day, a general education teacher is not a required team member. This should be noted on the IEP signature page. Teachers who attend the IEP should have working knowledge of the student's individual learning needs. The excused members must provide input into the development of the IEP in writing to the district and to the parent prior to the meeting. They are also required to sign and complete the IEP form under people not in attendance who provided information and recommendations on the meeting participation page. If this is an initial IEP meeting, the parent must sign to implement services. The parent must receive the PRO1 summarizing the events of the IEP meeting along with the procedural safeguard notices prior to services beginning for the student. If the district proposes a change of placement for a student, the IEP team is required to meet to discuss the change of placement. The team needs to determine if this is in fact a change in the continuum of services for a child. A continuum of services ranges from instruction in general education, special education, special schools, home instruction, instruction in hospitals and institutions. If the change in the student's services proposed does in fact change the student's placement on the continuum of services, the parent must give consent in writing for that
placement to happen.